Welcome everybody to the IET's Engineering and Technology Magazine webinar entitled Cybersecurity, How Much is Enough? With Waterfall Security Solutions. My name is Nikki Lancaster from the IET's ENT magazine. In an increasingly connected world, it is more difficult than ever for organizations to truly understand their cybersecurity requirements as systems and threats become more sophisticated. Yet a robust security program is fundamental to the success of any engineering business operating today. This webinar will enable you to safeguard your business by understanding the best approaches to cybersecurity risks, calculations, costs, and how to communicate these to business decision makers. The webinar will conclude with a Q&A session. Our speaker today is Andrew Ginter, VP of Industrial Security at Waterfall, who will guide us through this process. In this role, he promotes, evangelizes, and communicates Waterfall's innovative technology approach to cybersecurity for industrial control networks and critical network infrastructures. Andrew has spent 25 years leading and managing R&D of commercial products for computer networking, industrial control systems, and industrial cybersecurity for leading vendors, including Hewlett-Packard, Agilent Technologies, and Industrial Defender. Now I'm briefly going to run through some housekeeping. You can increase the size of the slides area in front of you by clicking on the green Maximize button in the top right, or resizing by clicking and dragging the bottom right corner. You can also press F11 on your keyboard to maximize the screen. You will see a Q&A box on the right-hand side of your screen. Please submit any questions as they arise during the webinar by typing them into this box. Answers will not be displayed. Instead, towards the end of the webinar, about 45 minutes in, we will field your questions that have come in. Please don't miss out on this opportunity and submit your questions early. We will endeavour to reach all your questions, but any we don't get to will be followed up afterwards. During the webinar, if the slides aren't moving in front of you, you may need to refresh your screen by pressing F5. For slow connections, you may possibly need to do this regularly. If you are having technical issues, please click on the yellow question mark widget at the bottom of your page, which directs you to our help pages. Here, please test your system, check minimum system requirements, and review the FAQs. If an issue persists, submit the problem to us in the Q&A box and we will assist. Please also note the other widget bottoms along the bottom of your screen. I'd like to highlight a few of these. You can open a widget simply by clicking on it and then closing it by minimizing or dragging or resizing. The pink widget on the far right, this will take you straight through to Waterfall's online hub if you want to check it out. In the center, you will see a red survey widget. Click on this to give us your feedback in 3 easy tick boxes anytime during the webinar. The IET resources list on the right-hand side of your screen. You will see a link entitled, "This webinar will go towards your CPD." If you're an IET member, you can go to this link and register for CPD credits for attending the webinar. If you cannot see the IET resources on the right, please put your request in the Q&A and we'll send you the resource. Everyone will receive an email within 48 hours with a link to the recorded event, so you and your colleagues can go back in, view the webinar, and also submit questions to the speakers after the event. People new to the webinar can register and watch the on-demand version, so you can share with your colleagues. Okay, enough housekeeping. Now I'm going to hand you over to Andrew Ginter of Waterfall.
Okay, thank you very much, and hello everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to chat with you my morning, your afternoon. The topic of the day is how much is enough. What does that mean? All security is a continuum. We can always be more secure. We can always be less secure. How do we decide how much is enough? How do we assess how much is enough? You know, when are we done? And especially, how do we communicate that to business decision makers so that they will give us the budget that we need to protect our systems adequately? These are all the topics we're going to be exploring. Part of assessing how much is enough is understanding the current threat environment. It's not possible to design a security system without understanding how we're being attacked. So fundamentally, what are we dealing with here? We're dealing with critical infrastructures. We're dealing with control systems, industrial control systems. The first 3 laws of cybersecurity: nothing is secure. We can always be more secure. We can always be less secure. Second one, all software can be hacked. Some people argue with this. I say, in practice, this is true. Don't believe it. go to your favorite software vendor's website and see how many security updates have come out in the last month. Even security software can be hacked. Even security software vendors put out software updates. I know this. I was a security software vendor. Attacks are information. That's, cyber attacks are embedded in information always. And every bit of information can be an attack, even a single bit. If an operator is sending a command to an engine to turn it on and someone intercepts that command and turns one bit and says, that one is a 0 now, I'm turning off the engine. We've misoperated the physical process by changing a single bit. Every bit can be an attack. This looks grim. It gets worse. Modern attacks take advantage of all of this. The classic modern attack that everybody's talking about and everyone's worried about is remote access. We piggyback an attack on legitimate remote access sessions, or we, steal people's remote access passwords. Once we're inside, we've got a foothold inside a compromised system, we look around for additional credentials. It might be pass-the-hash style credentials on Windows systems. It might be, additional credentials we steal through keyboard loggers, keystroke loggers, or, we might get lucky and find a plain text file of passwords lying around. It happens depressingly frequently. Once we're inside, once an attacker's inside, they generally take over the Active Directory controller when they can, create new accounts for themselves. Now they don't need to break into anything anymore. They have their own passwords, their own credentials. They can log in as any other administrator. These attacks routinely defeat all of the normal, IT-style protections. They defeat intrusion as antivirus systems because they're using low-volume malware. There are no signatures for malware that's only affected 10 or 50 or 100 systems. With stolen passwords, it doesn't matter if the system is completely patched and completely up to date. We're not, the bad guys coming in, they're not attacking vulnerabilities. They're using permissions to break into the systems. Sorry, wrong button here. How do we communicate this to our business decision makers? We generally communicate risk in one of two ways. We either use a quantitative, a numeric calculation, where we take the probability of compromise and multiply it by the average cost, the average consequence of compromise. This works great for looking backwards, for high-frequency, low-impact attacks, for common malware that gets on our systems. Our IT network gets infected an average of 73 times a year with common malware on a very large network. This is not unheard of. The average cost per infection to identify the compromised equipment, clean it out, restore from backup is $153,000. Do the math. You multiply it together, that's $11 million a year. That's the cost of this class of risk. That looks great looking backwards. Looking forwards, how many times has the European power grid collapsed because of a cyber attack? It's never happened. 0 times. Does that mean that the probability this year of it happening is 0? Well, no, it can't be. Nothing is absolutely secure. Because it's not absolutely secure, security is a continuum, and we can always be more secure, there's always an attack that will get in. So the probability clearly isn't 0. We cannot use this numeric approach for low frequency, high impact attacks. So we use a qualitative approach. We assign a number between 1 and 4 for threat, a number for vulnerability, a number for likelihood, a number for cost. We multiply these together and we get 15. And we say, well, the risk of the European grid collapsing is 15. But we've decided to accept all risks below 22. And so this is an acceptable risk, so we must be adequately protected. I mean, I'm sorry, I do this for a living. Even I have trouble understanding that. The average board of directors is going to see 15 and 22 and say, this is gobbledygook. I have no idea what we're deciding here. They can't really participate in this decision process. And so what we're seeing people start to do is, instead of describing backwards-looking statistics, which don't really capture future possibilities. They don't capture high-impact, high-consequence attacks. Instead of fudging numbers and throwing up abstract numbers and saying, well, 15 is better than 22, people are talking about attacks. The term people are starting to use is attack modeling. Instead of describing numbers, they describe attacks. Business decision makers have a much easier time understanding example attacks than they have understanding made-up probabilities or abstract qualitative scores. The risk analysis is largely the same. There is an emphasis on attack specialists. It's not possible to do a cyber risk analysis without an attack specialist on the evaluation team. We need someone who can look at our defenses and find the holes in the defenses, and we need other people on the team who can describe the cyber consequences, the defenses that might slow down the attack for a period of time, the physical consequences, and put the whole picture together and communicate to the leadership team, to the business decision makers, what is the simplest attack with high consequences that we do not have a high confidence level in defeating. There's always an attack like that. Security is a continuum. There's always an attack that will get through. And so we should be able to describe one or two or three of those attacks to our decision makers and ask, is this risk acceptable? I keep pressing the wrong button. Here we go. The lowest acceptable attack, the simplest acceptable attack, the term for this in physical security is design basis threat. A design basis threat document describes the attacks that a site is required to physically repel with a high degree of confidence. And so we've been using this term, we're seeing people use this term in the industry to describe cyber attacks as well. So let's look at a bunch of example attacks. Common malware getting in, triggering a shutdown because, we see Pac-Man running across the screen. The operators lost confidence in their ability to safely operate the process because they don't trust what they see anymore. An insider, reconfigures a batch file. Well, basic hygiene, antivirus systems, anti-spyware, security updates, they're going to keep the common malware out with a reasonable degree of accuracy. The malware has been getting worse and worse nowadays. The success rate of antivirus is dropping. But let's say this is where we've drawn the design basis threat. All of these others, an insider hits us, a vendor comes in by remote control. These are all very bad news that basic hygiene, the kind of stuff that we have on our laptops at home, is not going to catch. This is what a sort of a basic hygiene design basis threat diagram looks like. Here's a more sophisticated version. Well, who are all of the threats that are coming after us? There's insiders on the corporate network who might come in through they have passwords, they might log in through a firewall, they have an account, they might be annoyed with the company, they might want to misoperate things. How do we defend against them? We defend against them with permissions and passwords and firewalls, and do a fair job of keeping them out of our control systems. Organized crime produces the antivirus, the ransomware, the common malware that everyone deals with. This is what basic hygiene was designed to deal with. Do the basic hygiene, do some encryption, do some antivirus. We've got a reasonably high confidence of keeping this class of threat out. The problem is that it's costly. Security updates are constant change. Change is the enemy of safety and of reliability. Safety and reliability are the reason we have security for industrial control systems. And so to do all this security updates, it's very costly. We have to test them extensively. But if we're doing the classic bottoms-up defense in-depth architecture, it tells us, take a deep breath and go do the work. You have to do it. Insiders, we deal with the usual way: video monitoring, detailed logging. Basically, insiders are considered a low risk, but they do have privileged access to the system. The usual way to deter insiders is to log everything and make it clear that with this much evidence in hand, any insider who comes after us deliberately is going to be prosecuted, and this serves as a deterrent. This is standard stuff. We're not inventing anything here. Hacktivists, this is the class of attack. Hacktivists and intelligence agencies. This is the remote control attack. This is the sophisticated attack I was looking at a couple of slides ago. This is what hit the Ukraine in December of 2015. They came in remotely, they modified Active Directory, they created their own accounts, they watched the system for a little while, and then they acted and they turned all the lights off. The best that classic defense in depth has here is intrusion detection, eyes on glass. Watch the alerts, investigate the alerts. The problem is that this is very costly. A sensitive intrusion detection system produces false alarms, every one of which must be investigated. Otherwise, we miss stuff. I mean, there's no flashing green or flashing red we can put on the alarm and say, this is a false alarm, that's a real alarm. Go decide which one to investigate. If the system is sensitive enough to catch attacks with a high degree of confidence, it produces false alarms. We have to investigate them. It's a very costly thing. And it's ineffective. How long does it take to find an intruder? Some people say 24 hours. Some people say 2 months. There's different studies that we can read up on. It doesn't matter if it's 2 hours or 2 days or 2 months. If somebody walked into the control room for a power plant or for a chemical plant or for the railway switching system and sat down in front of the console and started moving the mouse and typing on the keyboard, how long would we be willing to let them do that before we kick them off? 2 hours? 2 days? 2 months? Not a chance. It doesn't matter how long they're on there. That's an unacceptable risk. The focus for IT systems might be intrusion detection. They might have no choice but to do that. That might be the right way to protect an IT system. It's the wrong way to protect a control system. We can restore damaged IT computers from backup. We cannot restore, derailed trains and human lives from backup. What's the alternative? A lot of the modern advice is talking about perimeters. Perimeters, the IT gurus tell us perimeters are dead. Well, they might be dead on IT networks. I mean, where's the perimeter around a cell phone? They're not dead on control systems. Who's going to take the safety system for a chemical plant that's dealing with hazardous chemicals? Who's going to take that safety system and put it on the internet without a firewall, without a perimeter? No one's ever going to do that. There's always a perimeter around control systems. This is why the control system advice is perimeter-centric. The control system advice is saying we must focus on preventing the attack coming in the first place, because any remote manipulation of our control systems, however briefly, is an unacceptable risk. What does this translate to in terms of modern advice? And I'll show you some examples of the modern advice a little bit later, but what it translates to is a top-down security posture. We draw the line somewhere. It's never possible to be completely secure. There's always going to be an attack above the line. If there's no attack above the line, we haven't done enough analysis. So we draw the line and we say, what could be above the line? A nation-state military who could buy or otherwise compromise every one of our employees at the plant. That's a very nasty attack. There's no cybersecurity technology we can put in place that's going to defend against that attack. Fine. Draw the line and admit that's a risk we have to accept. If we see that risk coming at us, we need to escalate to our own national intelligence agencies and get help in terms of protecting the people at our plants. But we can and should wipe out the threat from all of the lower level attacks. How do we do this? The modern advice is saying, look, the modern attacks, the hacktivists, the intelligence agencies, they're coming in by remote control. Wipe out that attack with unidirectional gateways. The gateways let us monitor the industrial process. They let us profit from access to the monitored data without any risk. They physically do not let anything into the plant. Remote control is impossible. The insiders, well, we do, the standard approach here: video cameras, detailed logging, deterrence. This is standard stuff. We're not inventing anything here. Organized crime, well, if the network attack vector is done, it's not possible to download this stuff anymore. The only way to bring it across into the site is through a physical perimeter. Again, the focus is on perimeter protection, network perimeter and physical perimeter. Physically inspect every device that crosses the physical perimeter that might carry data. USB drives, laptops, brand new equipment from the store, from the vendor, has to be inspected. And we only let it through when we're confident that whatever information is on the device is free of compromise. Corporate insiders that, from another continent reach through the firewalls into the control system, oh wait, they can't do that. The unidirectional gateways have them blocked. This is the modern approach, the modern perimeter-centric approach. So how do we explain this to our decision makers? Oh, before we get to that, let me say a few words about firewalls. I'm guessing that some of the folks on the line here are not familiar with unidirectional gateways. I've used the term here. What's a unidirectional gateway? Well, it's an alternative to a firewall. The old advice said you can go between networks of different criticality with a firewall. The new advice says that's a bad idea. Why? Because there's lots of ways through firewalls. This is a presentation I do at conferences from time to time. Lots of ways to break through firewalls with live demonstrations. I bring in a firewall, I hack through it. People love to see things break. If I could make it blow up, I'd get even more people in the room. It's entertaining to see things break. If you're curious, Google Ginter and 13 ways, and you'll see my article on in detail on all these ways to break through firewalls. The bottom line is, that was fun, that was entertaining. It's entertaining to see things break. Why would we trust our most important networks to these entertaining artifacts? And the answer is nobody does. This is why we have all of the countless compensating measures, the long passwords, the encryption, the antivirus, in an attempt to deal with the attacks that constantly leak through firewalls. The alternative is a unidirectional gateway. The gateway is the reddish solution in the center here. It consists of software and hardware. The software runs on regular computers, comes on a CD. The hardware is where the magic is. The transmit module has a laser in it, a fiber optic transmitter, but no receiver. Not a fiber optic transceiver, a fiber optic transmitter. The receive module has a fiber optic receiver, no transmitter, no laser. And there's a short, typically half a meter long, a short piece of fiber between one and the other. It's possible to send from a protected network out into the world, straight out to the internet if we want. And it's physically not possible to send any signal back. If no bit of information, not even one bit of information, can come back into our industrial network, then no attack can come back into that network as well, because all attacks are encoded in information. The software moves the data. The software is a client. It connects to a database through normal, login and password, queries the database for all the data, pushes the data out. The software on the outside is a client, connects to another database, pushes the data into the other database. Now we have the data on the inside, on the live system, and we've got a replica on the outside, a copy of the data. All of the data is in the replica database. Anybody on the outside who wants access to the data, who wants to profit from access to the data, can ask the replica for the data and get the same answer as the live system would have given without ever sending even one bit of information back into the industrial network, without ever putting the industrial network at risk of an attack. The technology out there, in terms of unidirectional gateways, there's a family of technologies out there. The gateway is sort of the flagship everybody talks about, but for different communications needs, there's variations. There's flip technology out there that is a gateway that can only send one way at a time, but on a schedule can flip. Why? Well, let's say twice a day for 10 minutes, we want it to flip so that we can pull antivirus signatures into the plant, update the antivirus, and then flip back and keep going. So it's a way to do scheduled updates without ever letting a remote control attack in. Remote control attacks are like remote desktop or secure shell, and you simply can't do that if it's only reversing orientation twice a day. Try and run a remote desktop session where you can't move the mouse all day long. You cripple remote control attacks. This is the goal. All of this cripples remote control attacks. Inbound, outbound gateways are if I need continuous flow of information in. For instance, in a power grid, a balancing authority might need to send commands every second or two to a power plant saying, give me more, give me less, to balance generation against load. And the power plant, of course, has to report constantly saying, here's what I'm doing, so that the balancing authority or the transmission system operator, depends what we call it, can make their decision. So there's a number of technologies here, all of which defeat remote control reliably. How is this used? Strong perimeter controls in the form of unidirectional communications are typically deployed at one layer in a defense in-depth architecture. So if we have, the bad guys, the internet at the top, and we have the protected control system network at the bottom, there's layer upon layer of firewall in these defense in-depth architectures. Replace one layer. Usually it's the IT/OT layer. Replace that layer with unidirectional gateways, and now we've defeated the possibility of remote control attack. Most people do IT/OT. Occasionally we'll see this technology deployed to protect safety systems and equipment protection systems. It's your choice. People choose the layer that works best for them in terms of protecting their most important networks. In environments where there is a SCADA network, where there's a back-end wide area network, the IT network and the internet above it is in a sense, the source of all evil, but any wide area network is a threat because the network is physically exposed. We cannot put a fence around, the telephone network. It spans the whole continent. And so in this case, again, what we'll see is sometimes an IT/OT layer, but we'll also often see unidirectional gateway, unidirectional protections deployed in remote substations, in pumping stations, in compressor stations, in the remote control centers that are unstaffed. And again, we tend to see inbound and outbound there because the central SCADA system has to be able to control these devices constantly. And of course, we want to monitor them constantly. So there's a couple of different use cases here. There's documentation out in the world as to how all this works. Okay, back to our topic. There's only two ways for an attack to enter a control system. It can either be a network attack coming through a network perimeter, or it can be a physical attack coming through a physical perimeter. We've talked about the network attacks. Let's talk about the physical attacks. Any device that we bring into the network that contains information is a potential threat. USB is the obvious one, but even a USB mouse has a CPU in it, has firmware in it, and can contain an attack. This is the modern discussion of supply chain integrity. All of this discussion is talking about what are we carrying into the site, and so we need inspection programs, we need supply chain certification programs to make sure that what we're bringing into the site is safe. This is part of the modern perimeter-centric protection mechanism. Protect the network perimeter and protect the physical perimeter. What does this add up to? Well, if we are talking to business decision makers, give them a simplified attack profile. Common malware is, organized crime, stuff is coming in on USBs or internet downloads. Insider attacks, brain blank. We've got an employee vendor with remote access who's manipulating our power plant systems. We have stolen remote access credentials, interactive remote access credentials, and the hacktivists are getting in and messing with stuff. The spectrum of attacks that we're worried about, again, basic hygiene gave us protection for organized crime and not much else. How about we do basic hygiene and throw some next-gen firewalls in? What's that bias? It turns out it doesn't move the line, because these remote control attacks routinely get through regular firewalls, next-gen firewalls. When I do the demo, I have a next-gen firewall there. I'm breaking through it. The insiders are inside. They don't care about the next-gen firewalls. It doesn't really help. If we show these decision makers, a standard bottoms-up defense in depth, intrusion detection, rats, the line's in the wrong place. I got to update this slide. Line should be one slot up. A standard defense in depth gives you a little bit better than basic hygiene because there's some deterrence for insiders. A standard defense in depth includes insider protections. So we've moved the line a little bit, but it's a costly program because of all this intrusion detection and because of all the testing that happens for security updates. If instead we use the top-down approach that a lot of people are talking about, it's got the insider protections and it's got the unidirectional gateways and it's got the perimeter protections, it's less costly. We're not spending so much money on intrusion detection and software updates anymore. We can still have those programs, but these are now secondary protections. And we can control the investment in those costly programs to reflect the limited residual risk reduction they're providing. The primary protections are physical inspections and strong network perimeters, intrusion detection in the unidirectional gateways, preventing infection, preventing compromise rather than intrusion, the costly intrusion detection systems just detecting compromise. Who's talking about this? What standards are talking about this? Let's look at, I understand most of the audience here is from Europe. ANSI in France is leading the world in terms of the advice they've put out. Their 2014 guidance, actually I think it's a regulation for control systems. It's guidance for existing systems, it's regulation for new systems. The 2014 rules identify 3 classes of networks. They say class 1 networks are not important to society. They give an example of a washing machine manufacturing plant. That plant may be important to the business, because if that plant gets taken over and the control system is compromised and it's down for a week or it's down for a month, the business is affected. But if the plant cannot produce washing machines for a month, society carries on largely unaffected. Class 2 networks are important to society. They give the example of a chemical plant control system, a large chemical plant. That's important. The outputs of the plant are important. A refinery, the outputs of the refinery is fuel. Fuel is important to modern society. We cannot ship food to cities without fuel. And class 3 networks are very important. They give the example of a railway switching system. If someone messes with a railway switching system, people are likely to die reasonably soon. They give another example of class 3 systems. The safety systems in that same large chemical plant are class 3. The control system is class 2, the safety system is class 3. Impair the safety system, and it's likely that workers at the site and possibly, the public at nearby communities is at risk. The ANSI standards say on expendable, on unimportant IT networks, or unimportant control system networks, go ahead and use IT-style protections. Off you go. Go do good things. Manage that any way you want. For class 2 networks, they recommend unidirectional communications. Unidirectional communications at the perimeter of the class 2 network, between the class 2 network and any class 1 or any lesser network. IT networks are class 1 as well. They're expendable. They have no impact on society. They might impact the business, but not society. They recommend unidirectional gateways for class 2 networks, and they strongly discourage remote access. Remote access is the attack vector that everyone is using for these sophisticated attacks, the ones that are flying under the radar and defeating, standard defense in depth. For Class 3 networks, they forbid firewalls. You can use firewalls internally in the Class 3 networks, but between a Class 3 network and, where you exchange information with less trusted networks, firewalls are forbidden. Unidirectional gateways are allowed. Remote access is forbidden. It's just too dangerous. And so the question that we need to ask ourselves, the question that we need to ask our business decision makers, which of our networks are important? Which of these are important enough to protect unidirectionally? The ANSI standards describe what the ANSI group on behalf of French society, the ANSI standards define what French society thinks is an important network. We, as the owners and operators of these, the washing machine plant, we might disagree. We might say, no, our control system network is important to us, thank you. And so we should be looking at the ANSI standards, not saying, the government thinks it's important enough to protect or not. We think it's important. Maybe we should be protecting it with a Class 2 mechanism instead of a Class 1. We decide which of our networks is important enough to provide strong protection for. When we're communicating this to boards and to executives, it can be difficult. The boards and executives, they look at the high level, the stuff that's published. There was a NIST framework published in North America recently. It's got 5 sections. Identify, which is a lot of policy and asset inventory. Protect, detect, respond, and recover. They look at all this and say, do we have all that? That's the wrong question to ask. That's the wrong inspiration to take. Protect, yes, I understand. Policy, that all makes sense. Why are we talking about detect and respond and recover in the same breath as protect? It's not the same priority. It can't be. How long are we willing to let someone operate our critical infrastructure remotely? 0, thank you. Yes, we need detection, but it's a second priority. The first priority has to be prevent compromise, prevent remote operation. And this is something that is confusing in existing guidance. So we need to train our boards, we need to train our executives to ask questions like, what is the most serious attack with a significant what is the simplest attack with a serious consequence that we are not completely confident of blocking? There's always a simplest attack. If we're told there's no such attack, the people talking to us, the people talking to decision makers are deceiving them. There's always a simplest attack we are not confident of defeating with a high degree of confidence. Explain that. Pick an attack that we are confident of defeating. A question that decision makers can ask the technical people that are protecting their systems. If we have an attack that we are confident of defeating, how are we going to defeat that? And listen to the answer. And if the answer is all about intrusion detection, that's the wrong answer. Because intrusion detection is giving control of our equipment to our enemies for a period of time. And this is generally unacceptable on important networks that control large, sometimes dangerous physical processes. If the board is wondering, do these people, are they really giving us the straight stuff, or are they feeding us Kool-Aid? Ask them, how dangerous would a penetration test be on the live system? If we paid someone to try and break into the live control system, how dangerous would that be? If the answer is that's too dangerous, we know there's something wrong, because our enemies are at least as talented as the penetration testers we hire. And some of our enemies are prepared to spend far more money to break into us than we're prepared to spend a penetration tester to test us. Our enemies are more capable than the penetration testers. If the penetration testers are too dangerous, you can be sure we're not going to keep our enemies out. So this is all context. This is all the kinds of questions we need to train our business decision makers to ask. Once they start asking these questions, once we start explaining attack scenarios to them, we should be able to convince them that, we need to protect our networks adequately. We need to decide how high to set the bar. Show our boards a picture of representative attacks with high consequences. Let them set the bar and have us explain how we're going to defend our networks to that degree. And again, it tends to be easier to do if we use the modern ANSI-style perimeter-centric defense model that is emerging as the new way to think about industrial control system defenses. So that was a lot of slides I went through very quickly. To try and recap, nothing is secure. There is always an attack that will breach us. There is always an attack with significant consequences that we are not very confident of defeating. We need to describe those attacks. We need to let our business decision makers say, ask how much will it cost to raise the bar, and see which attacks fall under the bar. Let them decide where to set the bar. Inevitably, I've found that when we do this, we wind up with more money in the budget for perimeter protection. Describe some of these attacks, and the reaction is frequently, that's unacceptable. I want that fixed. I don't ever want that to happen. Give me a high degree of confidence. And the money comes into the budget. Perimeters are essential. The perimeter may be disappearing on IT networks. It is vital on control system networks. No one is going to take an extreme example. No one's going to put a nuclear reactor safety system on the internet, ever. No one's going to put a chemical system safety system on the internet. In fact, no one's going to take the washing machine control system and put it directly on the internet, ever. That's just not going to happen. There's always a perimeter on control systems. The perimeter is always going to be essential to control systems, and the strength of the perimeter, to a very large extent, determines to what degree we prevent compromise of the control system. And attack modeling communicates risk. Okay, we still analyze the risks the same way we did with quantitative modeling, with qualitative modeling. We still analyze the risks the same way, though I do encourage us to have the right experts on the team. Put an attack specialist on the team. Put a safety system specialist on the team. Put a protection equipment specialist on the team. Put control system people on the team. Have them work together to identify high consequence attacks, and then communicate our risk posture to our business decision makers by describing which attacks we believe we can defend against reliably and which ones we can't, because there's always going to be attacks we cannot defend against. And ask, do you want to spend more money? Should we spend more money to defend against these other attacks? We need to set the bar. I believe that the kind of attack we saw in the Ukraine is unacceptable. What kind of attack was that? The attackers were in another country, sitting in their basements, sipping coffee while they were turning the lights out on the Ukraine. This is unacceptable. Nobody should be able to break into a control system. I don't care if it's a washing machine control system or if it's a railway switching system. Nobody should be able to break into that system while they're sipping coffee from the other side of the planet. That's ridiculous. Strong perimeter protections can and do defeat this class of attack reliably. Unidirectional gateways, strong physical protections keep the common malware and even sophisticated malware out. This is the new way forward. This is what ANSI is talking about. This is what NIST 882 is talking about. All of the recent guidance is moving in this direction. And so the question we have to ask, all of us, all of our networks, which of our control networks do we think is important enough to provide strong protection for? That's the message I'll leave you with. Do we have questions?
We do have some questions. Anybody who wants to ask a question, please do so now. I encourage you to. Use the widget on the side and make sure that you pop your questions in. Anything that we have on there that you don't want to be seen by anybody else or answered now, please put a note in your question and we'll email you afterwards. So, Andrew, the first question I have for you is Unidirectional Gateway Data Diode.
Yeah. They're similar. So the question, if I may paraphrase, is, is a unidirectional gateway a data diode? Are they the same thing? Some people use the terms interchangeably. Yes, we are talking about vaguely the same thing. But if you Google data diode, and I've done this, I did this recently, there's about 65 or 70 data diode vendors in the world. And they, by and large, produce hardware. The hardware I talked about, it's all the hardware is vaguely like that. Sender, receiver, nothing can come back. Some of them are stronger than others. Optical diodes are, in a sense, the gold standard. We can send photons, light waves, in one direction all day long. Fine. If we try and do that electrically, send electrons in one direction, those electrons have to come back. All electrical isolation really always has a back channel. That's the hardware. All of these, data diode vendors, they are military contractors providing local militaries with technology to send information into classified networks. 2/3 of them say they can do industrial control system networks. And look at their product offering. What do they have available off the shelf? Nothing. Really, what they're talking about is custom engineering. There's like 3 vendors in the world who have off-the-shelf technology for industrial systems, for making copies of industrial databases, for emulating industrial devices. Google unidirectional gateway, and you'll find all 3 of them. So I work with standards committees a lot. I've been encouraging the standards committees to use the term unidirectional gateway, because if they use the term data diode, people go searching for data diode. They find all these military vendors. They get discouraged because they really don't have anything. They say they do, but they don't. And so the standards are starting to use the term unidirectional gateway reasonably consistently. I'm still working on a couple of the committees, because if you search for that, you will find the products, the off-the-shelf products that do industrial stuff instead of just the military stuff. I hope that answered the question.
That's perfect. The next one we have is, how do you see these changing when an enterprise moves to a public cloud?
Yeah, so I gave 2 use cases there. There's actually 3 common use cases. I'm pressed for time here. The cloud use case I've submitted to the Industrial Internet Consortium. They're working with the German Industry 4.0. All of that industrial cloud stuff is coming. So there is a cloud use case. When we see stuff going out to the cloud, the site tends to send that information through a unidirectional gateway out. Nothing comes back. Or if something has to come back, we see an outbound gateway and an inbound gateway. Independent replications. It's not like a message goes out one and the answer comes back. That's what firewalls do. We replicate the industrial Internet of Things devices out to the cloud, and we replicate the cloud summary keyboard data, usually in a database or a publish-subscribe format, back into the SCADA system. It's a different diagram. I've got the Industrial Internet Consortium is about to publish their security framework. It's just going through final review. So give it a month, and you'll see that stuff. Or the other thing you can do, if I may be so bold, go on Amazon. I just published a book. It launched yesterday. Cybersecurity, What's Broken and How to Fix It. It's on Amazon. It's got a whole chapter on industrial Internet of Things and how it fits with this perimeter-centric approach.
Excellent. Thank you, Andrew. Next question. Where safety is a primary requirement, how can a third party assure that the security is appropriate? For example, that control can be regained to ensure safe operations can be continued and brought to a safe state.
That's a tough one. I'm not sure I understand the question, but let me take a shot at it. I'm not a safety expert. There's a whole discipline of analyzing safety, analyzing control systems for safety, predicting failures, making sure that there's sufficient redundancy and physical, mechanical, electrical, and digital safety systems in place to deal with predictable but undesirable outcomes. That's not what this is. This is security. Now, security is essential to safety. If we have safety systems that can be manipulated and disabled, then the security threat is reducing the safety of the site. And this is unacceptable. So I'm focused on cybersecurity. I don't get involved. The cybersecurity function isn't primarily responsible for doing the safety system analysis, but increasingly what we're seeing is cyber experts need to become part of the safety system analysis. And the reason is this. Traditional safety systems, they do physical failure analysis and they do, probabilistic analysis. How often, how long does this component tend to last? If it fails, what are the consequences? How long does it take to repair? Oh shoot, we need 2 of them. No, do the math. We need 3 of them in parallel. And they do this statistical analysis. The problem is that cyber attacks, cyber failures cannot be modeled statistically. Every cyber attack is an example of a systematic failure. If the attack worked once, it will work the second time. There's nothing probabilistic about it. And so this new type of systematic failure has to become part of the safety system systematic failure analysis. And too often it's not. Too often we're looking only at the physical process, we're looking only at statistical failures, and we're failing to take into account the possibility of simultaneous misoperation or simultaneous disabling of large numbers of components all at once. It's not statistical, it's not on a Gaussian curve. Bang, it happens all at once. It's a new kind of systematic failure that we need to take into account. I don't think that answered the question, but hopefully, if I gave enough context that we can get a clearer question or, more closer to what the answer the submitter here was looking for.
No problem. The next one we have for you is, in the context presented, are virtual private networks, VPNs, considered to be as defeatable as network firewalls?
That's a good question. VPNs, in some senses, tend to be stronger than firewalls. Now, it's a complicated question. Most of the time, the VPNs are built into firewalls. Most of the VPN products that we buy out there, the software products fine go on our laptops, but the hardware products are built into firewalls. So, in a sense, the server side of the VPN is a firewall. Now, it is possible to configure firewalls to be only VPN servers. And in that configuration, there's fewer points of attack into the firewall. There's still some. All firewalls are software. Go to the vendor's website, see how many security updates have come out to the software, see how many security updates have come out to the VPN part of the firewall software. It is still software, it can be breached, but it's generally a little bit harder to breach a firewall that is only configured for VPN traffic. So that's the good news. It's a step in the right direction. It's not a unidirectional gateway, but it's a step in the right direction. The way we defeat VPNs, the easy way to defeat VPNs is to compromise the endpoint. If we've got a laptop in a hotel room coming into our system, controlling, reprogramming our system, and I put malware on the laptop, I can wait for someone to fire up the VPN, an authorized user, log in, give the 2-factor RSA dongle, get all the way in, start reprogramming the control system legitimately, and then create an invisible screen, the way USB drivers do, move the window to the invisible screen, and put up an error message saying, remote desktop has stopped responding. Click here, I can fix it. Click, 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 nothing happens. You pick up the phone, you call IT, you ream them out, your system isn't working. The whole time, the enemy has control of the remote desktop window and is attacking the system right through the VPN. VPNs provide some degree of protection from man-in-the-middle attacks. They provide zero protection from compromised endpoints. So, yes, VPN only is slightly more secure than a firewall that lets all sorts of stuff through, but it is still very vulnerable to compromised endpoints. Now, if you're connecting two physically secure network sites with a VPN, that's more secure than connecting an internet-connected laptop to a VPN. Random remote access from every machine on the internet. Ask yourself, if we're allowing that, how many machines on the internet are allowed to reprogram the control system on our 2 gigawatt power plant? Well, most people would say none. What are you talking about? Well, every laptop with a VPN connection into that control system network can reprogram the control system network, and those laptops are on the internet, aren't they? So how many? The last time I asked someone, they said, never looked at it that way. Let me get back to you on that. And I asked, great, how many machines on your corporate network are allowed to reprogram the control system? And the answer was, no. Let me think about that. Okay. Every VPN connection that's allowed from a random endpoint is allowing a machine on the internet or on the IT network to reprogram the control system network. Is this an acceptable risk? Is this the consequence? Is this the right way to think about the problem? So I leave that question with you.
Excellent. And we've just got time for one final one, which is, please, can you give an example of how the secure bypass would work?
Sure. Secure bypass is used, it's a device that is vaguely like a gateway, but it's copper in and copper out, and there's a physical key in the front. When we turn the key, the copper is connected. Now, we see only, in practice, unidirectionally sites, we see only about 5% of the sites using this, but they'll use it in reliability emergencies. So, for example, a hurricane comes through a geography, and the transmission system company, the distribution company, the local utility asks for help. They have mutual assistance agreements with neighboring utilities. The neighboring utilities send in crews to help with restoring power. For the duration of this emergency, it's like a week-long emergency. You've got people all over the place doing things to the system who haven't done the background checks. They're not part of the security system. They need emergency remote access to everything. And for the duration of the emergency, and NERC SIP, even in North America, even provides for this, it's called the SIP declared emergency. For the duration of the declared emergency, you relax security, because security is supposed to improve safety and improve reliability. If security ever gets in the way of reliability, we've deployed the wrong security system. So secure bypass is put in parallel with unidirectional gateways and provides rare emergency remote access into systems during reliability emergencies. It's discussed in the new textbook as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed, Andrew. That now brings us to the end of today's webinar. Thank you all so much for attending. Any unanswered questions will be followed up after today, and sorry that we didn't get a chance to reach them all immediately. Please note that you'll receive an email within 48 hours with a link to the recorded webcast so you and colleagues can go back and view. You can also submit further questions through this to Waterfall. And finally, don't forget to register for your IET CPT credits via the resources widget and fill in the short survey to give us some feedback. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Take care.